We take 18 ounces of sizzling ground beef and soak it in rich, creamery butter. Then we top it off with bacon, ham, and a fried egg. We call it the Good Morning Burger.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at the Good Morning Burger. Please stick around after the episode to find out how you can win a trip to Italy with me, thanks to Omaze. More on that later, because for now we gotta measure out 18 ounces of beef. This is going to be one truly Homer Simpson appropriate burger. I'm gonna try to pat out a patty that's not too wide for a burger bun, but not too thick to cook in a frying pan, which is impossible. So we're just gonna make this, which we are of course going to season liberally with kosher salt, and I'm tired of pestling my pepper, so I procured a pepper mill from the closest purveyor in my proximity so I could properly pepper my patty. Once we got that patty all seasoned, we're going to slice up a little bit of ham that we're going to fry in a little bit of vegetable oil, just so it's not cold going onto our burger. Likewise, I've got my bacon roasting at 375 in the oven. Now I'm going to grease up a non-stick skillet with a little bit more vegetable oil, and once it's preheated, I'm going to carefully, our giant burger patty, which I'm going to season antipodally with a bit more kosher salt and freshly ground pepper, and then I'm going to slowly but surely fry it on both sides, flipping after 6 to 7 minutes or until it's got a nice golden crust, stopping to admire my flames. You know what they say, flame recognize flame, and then continuing to cook an additional 6 to 7 minutes until it registers 145 degrees Fahrenheit internally. Simultaneously in a sideline saute pan, I'm going to fry one sunny side up egg before spreading a gargantuan amount of rich creamery butter on top of our burger, my best approximation at soaking it in butter, as per the commercial's instructions. Now I'm going to bring it over to my awaiting burger bun, do my absolute damnedest to get it down on there without screwing anything up. I don't have much more beef to play with. There we go, and then I'm going to top it with 3 slices of crisp bacon and our slice of fried ham. Last up, our sunny side up egg, and mystifyingly, no cheese. I guess they're trying to be a little health conscious. Speaking of which, I've been on a diet for a while, and my dear trainer friend Chris has been subjecting me to all kinds of vegan and raw and boiled foods, so I thought I'd subject him to the hazards of my workplace. There you go, Chris. This is for all those reverse ass-in-the-air crunches that you made me do in front of the beautiful people at my gym last week. Now, as far as revenge plots go, this one didn't work so well because this was a delicious burger. It's a burger soaked in butter, but it is, of course, total overkill. Why don't we go for a slightly more restrained Wisconsin-style butter burger? Now, for a burger like this, we gotta make our own butter, which is as simple as filling the jar of a food processor with non-ultra-pasteurized heavy cream and running until the fats separate, which should take no more than like 2 minutes. We're then going to strain and squeeze the butter out through several layers of cheesecloth, like so. The objective here is to squeeze out as much whey as possible, and now we're going to take it one step further and rinse it out. Normally I'd just do this under the sink, but I want you folks at home to see. We are rinsing the butter in as cold water as is legally available until the water runs pretty much clear, indicating that we have gotten rid of most of the whey. So we're going to season it with a generous pinch of kosher salt, massage that on in there, and boom, fresh, delicious, creamy homemade butter, which we're going to use to make an approximation of the butter burgers from Sully's Grill. For that, we need to try and recreate some of their famous stewed onions. So I've got 2 roughly chopped small white onions, which I'm going to slowly cook in about a 1/4 cup of olive oil over medium heat for 2 to 3 minutes until just softened, not browned. We want to gently heat these onions and not caramelize them in any way. We're also going to add about 2 tablespoons of our homemade butter and maybe 1/3 cup of dry white wine. And then I'm going to cover and let these stew for 10 minutes. I adapted this recipe from living burger demigod George Motes, so you know it's going to be good. 10 minutes is up, and we're just going to give these guys a little stir, make sure that nobody's sticking to the bottom of the pot, and add maybe 1/3 cup of beef broth and a few twists of freshly ground black pepper. And then we are bringing that to a simmer, lowering the heat, covering and simmering for another 10 minutes. We're then going to simmer uncovered for about 20 minutes until we're left with a thick, delicious onion jam. Try not to eat this with a spoon because it's going on our burgers. Speaking of which, let's get those made. What I'm going to do here is sandwich a 1/4 pound beef ball betwixt 2 sheets of parchment paper and use the bottom of a plate, roughly the size of my intended burger, to act as a mold, because we're trying to approximate the pre-smashed burgers from Sully's. Now I'm going to cut the parchment paper down to size and smack this guy face down on a ripping hot stainless steel or cast iron skillet. And this burger's super thin, so just from this point on, treat it like a smash burger. Super high heat, season on one side only with kosher salt and freshly ground pepper, flip once nicely browned on one side, and once flipped, immediately apply cheese. Yellow American is the only way to go. We're then going to top with a few tablespoons of our stewed onions and apply a little bit of water to our cooktop before covering so the cheese can steam and fully melt. While the cheese melts, we are besmearing the top of our toasted burger bun with just way too much butter, like 2 to 3 tablespoons worth, retrieving our completed burger and introducing it to our bun. And as they say in Wisconsin, I have no idea what they say in Wisconsin. All I know is that this is going to be a really tasty burger. One that I am unfortunately not allowed to eat. And since Chris had to leave on an exercise emergency, here are Sawyer and Vinny to do the taste testing for me. It is a messy, drippy job, but somebody's got to do it. And profuse dripping is a sign that you've made your butter burgers correctly, because these things are meant to be swimming in a pool of their own butter. So it's no surprise that they entered the very messy but clean plate club.
One ribwich, please. Now without lettuce.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at the curious case of the ribwich, a rib sandwich whose contents do not include ribs. So right off the bat, we are breaking the rules by making a dry rub for our ribs. We're starting with about a cup of dark brown sugar, a tablespoon of chili powder, a teaspoon of dry mustard, half a teaspoon of cayenne pepper, a teaspoon of smoked Spanish paprika, a teaspoon of garlic powder, and a good shake of normal paprika because why not? Then, just like any dry rub, we gotta season with kosher salt and freshly ground pepper, about 2 teaspoons each worth. Tiny whisk together to the best of your ability, and be sure to taste for seasoning. Remember, if your dry rub doesn't taste good, you won't taste good. Oops, sorry you had to see that. Now we're on to the wet rub, I guess you'd call it. A heady mixture of about 4 parts yellow mustard to 1 part ketchup, and maybe like 1 part liquid smoke. I know all the barbecue aficionados are shaking their heads at me, but we're trying to solve the riddle for oven ribs that we're just gonna make into a sandwich anyway. Save your energy for summer. Speaking of ribs, the first thing we have to do with our ribs is rip off the papery membrane on the back of every rib. Paper towels make it very easy to grip your membrane, which sounds like a dirty saying, but it's not. Then we're brushing down every surface with our mustard ketchup liquid smoke mixture, and then using that as a kind of glue for our dry rub. We're starting with the bottoms of our ribs and then repeating on the top. At this point, your house should smell thoroughly like barbecue. If it doesn't, I would check your spices' expiration dates. Anyway, we're stacking these ribs high and then wrapping them in the strategically placed plastic wrap that we put on the table, and then we are refrigerating for at least 8 hours and up to 24. An entire day later, and we're going to unwrap our ribs and place them onto a rimmed baking sheet, and then we're going to put that in the freezer because we're going to place them in a very hot oven. This method comes courtesy of America's Test Kitchen, the key step of which is to smoke the ribs using lapsang tea, which is very clever because it has its own inherent smokiness. So we're going to spread out 6 bags worth of lapsang tea on our other rim baking sheet that we're going to put a rack inside of, and then I'm going to make a big old aluminum foil top by merging 2 sheets together at the seam, like so. Do not want any smoke getting out. Speaking of which, here come our ribs after their 45-minute stint in the freezer, during which time our oven has also been preheating to 500 degrees Fahrenheit with a pizza stone inside to make sure that all that heat is getting transferred up into the tea. Once our parcel is tightly packaged, we're placing in the 500-degree oven for 30 minutes, and then removing, lowering the heat to 250 degrees Fahrenheit, and pouring a beer into the corner of our baking sheet. This is going to steam the ribs and help them become very, very tender over the next hour and a half that they're going to spend in this 250 degree Fahrenheit oven. Now, during the last 30 minutes of cooking, we're going to make a quick and simple barbecue sauce, starting with half a grated onion and 3 cloves of crushed garlic. These are the aromatics that we're going to saute in a small saucepan along with a little squirt of vegetable oil over medium heat for about 2 or 3 minutes until everybody gets soft and smelly in a good way. Then we're adding about a tablespoon's worth of chili powder, letting that toast for another 30 seconds or so, and then adding a cup of ketchup, along with 2 to 3 tablespoons of blackstrap molasses. For both sweetness and color, 2 tablespoons of Dijon mustard, about a teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce, a little tiny shake of cayenne pepper, about 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, 2 teaspoons of smoked paprika, and that's just about it. Then we're going to tiny whisk all these guys together, cover, and simmer for 20 minutes. Then we're just going to keep this guy warm until the ribs are ready to go, which they are. For this application, what we're looking for is for the bone to be able to twist with little resistance, even though it's still attached to the meat. But we still got one step left here, and that is the second coat of paint. Starting with the underside of the ribs, we're going to generously coat them with our freshly made barbecue sauce, and then throw them under the broiler for 5 to 7 minutes until until browned and crisp. We're then going to turn these meat side upward and repeat, lovingly slathering with barbecue sauce and placing under the broiler for 5 to 7 minutes until browned and crisp. You can keep repeating this if you like, but I'm going to stop here because dare I say it's sandwich time. My plan was to just pull the bones out and make sort of boneless rib patties, but these ribs weren't quite meaty enough and they ended up falling apart. But I think that's going to make for a damn fine sandwich. The ribwich might not have lettuce on it, but if it's modeled after the McRib, that means thinly sliced white onion and dill pickles, all atop a squishy, pillowy submarine roll. Let's arrange some nice boneless ribs on top, give it a nice second coat with barbecue sauce, and then lovingly arrange some onions and pickles over top. It was at this point that I realized I'm not making the food from the show, I'm making a tribute to the food from the show, and sometimes that's okay. In this instance, I wanted to recreate the pupil dilating, blood pressure pumping, borderline illegal nature of the ribwich, and I gotta say, in that spirit, this is a pretty close approximation. It was also an opportunity to take a look at oven ribs, a challenge faced by anyone who gave up mowing their lawn in favor of living in an apartment, and there's definitely some great technique to take away here, enough to get half the sandwich in the clean half sandwich club. Hang on, I gotta take this half in the other room for analysis.
We're back, baby!
We're back. Are you rolling?
No.
All right. Welcome back to the first Botched by Babish in well over a year's time. Today, we're taking a look at, what was it? The ribwich.
We're back, baby!
Today, we're taking a look at the ribwich. Now, I didn't necessarily screw it up, but I didn't do like the show accurate version. I just made a gourmand's version. And one or two commenters said you should make the frozen patty of pork product that's gesturally reheated and put on what could be termed by the US government as a bun. And I'm down to do that. The patty, I absolutely guarantee, is not made from ribs. Why? Because ribs, pound for pound, most expensive pork on the meat on the pork, meat on the pig, because it's mostly bones. It's when you're getting ribs, you're buying it for the novelty of the almost McRib-like form factor. So what we're going to do is, instead of using any ribs whatsoever, we're going to use pork shoulder because it's virtually the same meat, just in a different form factor. So we're going to break that down. We're going to process it in a food processor to make a sort of pork paste, and then we're going to form it into the rib form factor, giving it pleats, if you will. Pleats? No. Ribbing it for your pleasure. I had to. First thing we have to do is cut up the pork and then freeze it briefly so as to firm it before passing it through the food processor.
I probably want to start with the bread first, just 'cause it needs to.
Never mind, we're starting with the bread. In order to start with the bread, I'm going to use a mixer because I don't feel like doing this by hand. There's no way McDonald's does it by hand. We're starting with what looks like about 2 cups of water, precisely. And to that, I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of instant yeast and 1 tablespoon of sugar. I'm going to tiny whisk those together so that there is a semblance of homogeneity. So we have 1 pound, 2 ounces of bread flour, to which I'm going to add half a cup. And I'm going to tiny whisk these together to evenly distribute the semolina. Did I say cornmeal just now? No, I said semolina, right? Did I say semolina?
I haven't been listening.
And just like that, I'm going to add it to the flour. Turn this on and mix this until I get a shaggy dough, and then I'm going to add oil and salt, and then I'm going to knead it until it passes the window pane test, probably. Okay, so I have not been keeping track of how long this has been going, because like McDonald's, I'm cooking with my intuition. You know, I'm not following a recipe. It's not the McDonald's way. That's a wet dough. That's quite a wet dough, but that's probably okay. So let's see if it is up to the task of being window paned. Look at that. That is popular video game franchise, Max Payne. This is an extraordinarily wet dough though, so maybe I should handle it using oil?
I thought you'd handle it using hands.
Folks, this is a solemn promise from me. Unless I am in very real danger, I'm done screaming. I'm done screaming. This is a chill channel, and I shouldn't have been screaming in the first place. I'm going to oil both the bowl and my digits, and I'm going to let this proof at room temp for an hour, hour and a half until it has Michael Dublayed in size.
Because it's buble, but you said duble.
What do you mean? Next up, a bit of light butchery. Why is this not working?
I think your hands are wet.
That's not true. Yes, they are. You know a faster way to dry your hands?
Cut them off.
All right, so we have some pork shoulder meat. So I'm cutting this into about 1-inch cubes. I want something that the food processor is going to be able to handle, because rather than grind this, we're going to use a food processor so that we get more, almost like a hot dog farce, because it is a pretty uniform texture, this patty. I assume it's going to be a pretty smooth grind. Brad, when's the last time you had a McRib? You'll notice I didn't ask if you've had a McRib. I said, when's the last time you had a McRib?
But I've never had a McRib.
Oh, me then. My favorite piece of pork that I have here.
Yeah. Like if you had to pick one.
It's like asking me to pick my favorite child. Oh, okay, this guy. This is my favorite right here. This almost looks like pork belly due to the amount of fat that's involved in its constitution. And this is, don't tell the others, but this is my favorite piece of pork amongst the batch.
I'm glad we shared this moment.
Yeah, thanks for asking me a question. Meat's good and chili. Got it here. See, it's perfect.
That doesn't look like chili to me.
You finished?
I'm sorry.
Good. I'm going to do this in batches so as to not overwhelm the machine. And I'm going to add a bit of ground rosemary because we're trying to follow the exact recipe from the McDonald's Nutrition Facts website. And that states that it contains ground pork parts, a lot of salt, sugar, of course, because it's McDonald's, and a little bit of rosemary oil, which is a preservative and not very flavorful in its own right. So we're going to use just rosemary because it's a very prevalent ingredient in barbecue. And then while the machine runs, I'm going to stream some ice water in to emulsify it into the meat. That's hopefully gonna do something, I don't know. Got the rosemary. Where do you want me to do this? It's in shadow over here. It doesn't matter, I'm just grinding some rosemary.
Don't you do things in shadow over time?
I do. This city just showed you. That's not even my good. I can do a better Batman than that.
Prove it.
Where were the other drugs going? They were in the Narrows. The cops only go there when they're in force. Do I look like a cop? That was pretty good. Okay. That looks farcical to me. All right. There, ladies and germs, is our pork farce. It looks good and like almost whipped, like emulsified, which means that it's gonna probably have a nice smooth texture, which is really what you want in your preformed rib pork patty. But how does it taste?
No.
What? Don't, what, eat the, why not?
No, don't do it.
What's wrong with it?
I felt like you were going to do it for the joke, and I really don't want you to.
It's
I wouldn't do that.
It's fine.
I would never do
It
that.
was really close to
I
your
would-
No,
no,
now I
I
really think you're going more than ever.
Why would I put this in my mouth?
I'm so certain you're gonna do it. Now that the camera's not on you, maybe
No,
not.
it is though. It is though, Andrew. If you did it, I would capture
Don't do
it.
it. Don't. No. I'm so serious.
But now I'll get Kendall's face if you
There's
do.
stuff happening in the world right now.
So bread. Our bread dough has damn near doubled in volume. It's time to form it, which actually I don't know how to do. How are these being formed?
Flour your work surface and sprinkle cornmeal on 2 baking sheets. Turn out the dough and divide into 4 roughly equal pieces. Roll each piece into a log about 12 inches long. Place 2 logs on each baking sheet. So look at
What? All right, so in order to roll these into hoagies, I'm going to pat them out into a rectangle and then just kind of roll them up and then sort of try to taper the edges, even it out a little bit, and tell me that doesn't look like a piece of shit. Okay, pat it out into a rectangle, and you said fold it like in the thirds?
And then, but if that one goes a little bit further in, and then that last piece goes all the way over, you know what I mean?
Oh, okay. Okay. All right, I see. So like over here, and then all the way over. And then I flip it over on its seam,
I don't know.
twist it a little bit. They're all bad. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try straight up rolling this one, just like a jelly log.
Why is it called a jelly log?
I don't know. Brad. I just sort of said some words. I smashed a couple words together to see if anything useful would come out. Turns out, no. Turns out you can't just say stuff.
It's almost like it just doesn't make any sense.
It's almost like we shouldn't even be doing this. It's almost like we're massively underqualified to be making a cooking show. And it's a wonder that anybody followed us in the first place, much less continues to support us. It's almost like that. So these are going to rise for some amount of time. Going this way. So, in order to rib my meat, I'm going to wrap it in what's that stuff that condoms are made of?
Hair.
So to make these patties ribbed, I'm going to put them in some latex.
Isn't that
So
silicone?
I'm going to lube up said silicone, and I'm going to start forming this into freaking patties. I'm eyeballing it. Yeah, buddy. That looks like a McRib. Especially on this side. I think this side's gonna look even more like a McRib. That is how you make a McRib patty at home. You know, even if it's only ribbed like that on one side, it's fine.
I think it looks fantastic.
I think it looks amazing.
I really didn't have the vision that you had.
So happy.
I think it looks disgusting.
That's very nice.
That wasn't very nice, Brad. What was your aim in saying that? To get some yucks? Compared to how it's actually made, this is beautiful. This is like childbirth. What's beautiful? This is like mountains. it's like a picture of mountains. This. Compared to the reality of how the McRib is made, this is beautiful. Sorry, I'm all porked out here. I'm all porked out. Woo!
Sorry.
Okay, we have our pork patties. I never thought I'd see the day. So these are going in the freezer because naturally, before anything you eat at McDonald's is cooked, it has been frozen and shipped and frozen again and microwaved. That's how it works. That's what we're doing. These guys are going in the freezer. We're out of things to say. Still going with the sentence, doing that bit again. I think I'm done. Welcome back to Botched by Babish. risen. It's Easter somewhere. I'm gonna dust these with a little bit more semolina because they appear to be dusted as such on McDonald's website. So now I'm gonna place a slash right down the shaft, thusly. All right, here we go. Into the oven they go. It's at 350, which is the temperature at which they're gonna be baked for an amount of time. After which, we'll take them out and look at them and decide whether or not we gotta do it again. This is a cooking show. All right, these look surprisingly good considering how badly I put them together. So these are looking righteous. The pork patties are freezing and we're gonna put all these things together tomorrow. So we'll see you then.
Run. Andrew, wake up.
I was just finding my center. Okay, folks, it's day 2. Pork patties have been patified. The bread has just been kind of hanging out, and we're gonna make some pickles. I'm doing a quick pickle. These are cucumbers. I'm gonna thinly slice them, and then I'm going to make a pickling brine, bring it to a boil, pour it over, let them sit for like 30, 45 minutes, and that's how you make quick pickles. We have 1 spotty brown clove of garlic. Throwing that in there. I'm also gonna throw the spices in here. We have half a teaspoon of dried dill, 1 teaspoon of mustard seed, 2 teaspoons of kosher salt, a tablespoon of sugar, single bay leaf, and a half teaspoon of Telecherry peppercorns. So now we're gonna combine half a cup of white vinegar and 1/3 of a cup of water. And we're gonna bring those to and simmer. Now all we have to do, daintily pour it over top. Just gonna give this a little stir to make sure that the salt and the sugar have did that thing where they become no longer a solid in the presence of a liquid, which is dissolve. That's the word. Cover this up. Let it sit for about 45 minutes and you got yourself some quick pickles. Barbecue sauce. All right, so we have 1.5 cups of water. What's with the cornstarch?
So McDee's has cornstarch in theirs.
So I'm just gonna bring all this to a simmer and then add cornstarch to it?
That's
Like,
it,
like a simp?
yeah.
Am I using that word right, child?
No. The word changes meaning when, my boss says it.
What we have here is 1.5 cups of tomato paste that we're combining with 1.5 cups of water. You might notice that those are the same amounts. That's no accident, folks. That's the power of measurement. 1/4 cup of molasses. Just said that weird just to piss you off. And it wasn't much. It wasn't much. It didn't piss you off that bad. But it made a measurable change in the quality of your day. 3 tablespoons of sugar. And since this still needs more sugar, we have 3/4 cup of high fructose corn syrup. It wouldn't be McDonald's without sugar made from corn. We have 1/4 cup of white vinegar. We got a teaspoon of liquid smoke, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1/2 teaspoon of onion powder, and 1/4 teaspoon of smoked paprika. Do they use smoked paprika, or are we just doing that to bring more smoke flavor?
No.
So we're not being accurate, essentially.
Well, it's in, they put, hold on.
I don't care.
They
Let's
grow-
bring this to a simmer over on the stovetop. I guess probably cook that for like 30 minutes. I'm going to give this a regular size whisking so as to incorporate all this shit.
No, I'll bet you that this sauce is going to be on fleek. Remember that millennial slang?
We're so old, dude. We're so f***ing old.
Yeah. What happened to us?
Actually, we had a pretty good run.
Yeah,
If this is the end, if this is how it ends,
I don't know, but I mean, if it is, I'm glad I'm with you.
thanks, man. So, I let this simmer for like 30 minutes, and it has thickened of its own accord. I see no need to artificially thicken it, so I'm not going to. So I'm gonna take this off the heat, and there are thinly sliced white onions, so I'm just gonna slice some onions in anticipation of that reality. Were you not recording? Oh no, for how long?
God damn it. All right, Andrew, it's time for you to punish me.
Brad, this time a year ago, I would have until you were screaming with joy. But I'm a changed man now. I'm grown, okay? And I can forgive. I know that that isn't exciting for you from the perspective of gratification, but to be fair, you need therapy. So now, since we have buns and patties of all manner of shapes and sizes, I'm gonna try to make a good match here. I want a patty that's at least resembles its target bun. I think this guy is definitely my best bet. It's the exact size and shape. This is the single worst one, and I think it's gonna be my guy. Yeah, all these patties are perfectly shaped to the reject bun. That just goes to show you, kids, don't sleep on the weirdo. You know what I was in middle school? A weirdo. You know what I am now? Rich. This is the
John Doe.
buns right here. This is me.
John Doe?
He was not only like a mid-tier bully. He wasn't like the one who like shoved me into the lockers and shit, but like he would just make fun of me for not being allowed to watch South Park and stuff like that. And he ruined my life at the time because it was like an after-school special. I was cashing my first ever paycheck, and I was leaving the bank, and he rode up on his bike with his latchkey friend, and he was like, "Hey, you want to buy some weed?" And this is the way it was in my memory. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I do." So I was curious. I was very curious. For $60, he gave me these 2 baggies that were probably oregano. Like, we were in 8th grade, people. This was not a legit drug deal. I brought it home, and I felt so guilty, I thought I might die. I thought I had let down my God, my country, my scout troop, my father, everything. I thought that I had betrayed everything I had worked so hard to build at age 12. So I felt so bad, I called
John Doe.
and I said, "Please take it back." Please take it back. I can't keep this. And he said, "I'm not giving you your money back." And I said, "Okay, just take it." What was I thinking? Like, I lived next to a cornfield. I could have shot-putted that into the wilderness, but I was like, okay, I'll bring it back to him for free. So I biked over to his house, did a little handoff on his driveway. I biked home, and I felt relief that I haven't felt since and will never feel again. Because the next day, he called me and he said, "Hey, my dad's gonna call your dad." And I was like, "What?" And apparently, those 2 baggies, apparently we had dropped one of the baggies on the driveway next to his father's car. And he saw it in the morning. And here's how
John Doe?
ruined my life, is that he told his dad that I came to his house trying to sell him weed. And he said no. So, while my dad was kind enough to kind of believe me, the rest of the neighborhood were not so gracious. And I garnered the reputation as the neighborhood drugs dealer, despite never having used and only briefly having frightfully handled an eighth of weed. I became the neighborhood drug dealer. And on my birthday, my best friend at the time, his mom called me and told me not to hang out with her son anymore. And this was my only friend in the world. So I had to change schools. It changed my whole life for the better. I ended up going to a nice school and it changed my whole life. So that just goes to show you that maybe things will work out. And maybe things aren't as bad as they seem in that moment. Maybe they will lead to an even better situation.
And so how does this relate to bread?
Gluten development? Let's cut this bread. Very carefully, actually, because I just realized this is my only shot at happiness. Really don't want to muss this up. Wow, did I just do that perfectly? Whoa, perfect. I'm gonna nuke this for about 10 seconds so it gets nice and soft and pillowy and warm. And then I'm going to cook the patty to McDonald's specifications. A body cam of a McDonald's employee went viral recently where they showed the process where they just kind of like pan fry it for a second. They just shove it into a drawer and then with barbecue sauce and they just like heat it through the rest of the way with the barbecue sauce. So that's effectively what we're gonna do. And then we're gonna eat it. And then Brad and I are gonna take a little break because it's been a long week. If you can't tell from how unhinged I'm becoming. Are you rack focusing right now or just letting it go? All right, I think this is my winner man. Yeah, this guy's appropriately thin and ridged. It's a perfect fit. It's a match made in hell. Fan smoking, it's a little bit of oil in here, and so now I'm just going to get a little color on this guy, and then I'm gonna douse him in the sauce. Yeah, so in the leaked body cam footage, this McDonald's employee just sort of throws it in there until it's got a little golden color on it, and then they throw it, they shove it in the drawer, and then they douse it in barbecue sauce and boil it till it's done. So
Aren't the body cams supposed to prevent that kind of violence?
you'd think. All right, a little bit of color. It's pretty much exactly where I wanted it to go. So now I'm gonna turn this down and do this.
Proud of yourself?
I mean, to some degree, I'm always upset with what I'm doing. I'm going to go microwave this. I'll see you tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Yeah. Because it's going to take me so long to go down here and microwave it.
Oh,
That's the joke.
It's a joke. Okay.
Yeah, it's funny.
I like that.
This is probably done? Question mark? Okay. This has been cooked to a state of doneness. It has some nice caramelized barbecue sauce to show for it. That looks like it looks pretty McRibby, if you ask me. Are you asking me?
No.
No. The pickles. Throw them down all over the place, as though I didn't have a care in the world. Could you imagine? Onions, thinly sliced, whispers of onion. Top it up, and there we have it. We have the more show-accurate version of the ribwich. Let's see how we fared. I mean, that tastes like the ribwich, yeah. I mean, it's just pork with barbecue sauce and pickles and onions. So how could we possibly get this wrong? Actually, it's incredible. Kendall said maybe don't use rosemary in the pork patty because she thought they add rosemary extract or oil as a preservative, not as a flavorant. And she was dead right, because there's one flavor that doesn't belong in here that wasn't in the McRib whenever I've had it, and it's the rosemary. So leave that out if you do this at home. I don't know why you would. And you're gonna have yourself a McRib any time of year, no matter what pork prices may be. You can have it in your home.
Speaking of, where is Kendall?
I know what you're thinking.
The perfect chance to make my patented space age out of this world moon waffles. Let's see here. Caramels, waffle batter, liquid smoke. Fattening.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we are utterly destroying a waffle iron using these caramels. Now, I haven't had these things since I was a kid, so let's see, before we turn these into sugary, molten, burnt lava. Yeah, those are pretty good. So we're gonna go ahead and dump a handful of these directly onto the waffle grate. Top that with some store-bought waffle batter. I'd say don't use too much or it will overflow, but it's gonna overflow no matter what. Gently close up your waffle iron. Grab a taste of some delicious waffle oh no, that's disgusting. Whoops, almost forgot a healthy pour of liquid smoke, one of the 3 most important parts of this 3-ingredient recipe. That results in a burnt waffle that is extremely sticky and very difficult to get out of your waffle iron and leaves it completely destroyed. And what's a waffle without butter, so why not use an entire stick? Wrap it up like a burrito from hell and secure it with a wooden skewer. And be sure to burn both your mouth and hands while attempting to take a bite. Now if you can't tell, I don't like this thing very much, so we're going to take a crack at making a slightly better version. We're going to start by making some brown butter. We're going to heat a stick of butter over medium-low heat, swirling and shaking constantly until the milk fats begin to brown. You can see those little brown particles in the bottom there. And we're going to set it aside so it can solidify for ideal waffle application. Next up, the issue of caramel. Caramel. How are you supposed to say it? Caramel. We're going to combine half a cup of water and 1 cup of sugar and bring it to a boil in a large saucepan. Stir gently, making sure not to allow the sugar to stick to the sides of the pan. Pour yourself a scotch for color reference, and bring the mixture to 350 degrees Fahrenheit before adding a quarter cup at a time, 1 cup of heavy cream heated to almost boiling. Wait for the bubbling to subside before adding the rest of the cream, whisking over very low heat until well combined, and optionally flavoring with a half teaspoon of vanilla extract. This stuff might look pretty thin, but it's going to get nice and sticky and gooey as we set it aside to cool at room temperature. Last but certainly not least, the waffle batter. We're going to combine 1 3/4 cups all-purpose flour with 1 tablespoon of cornmeal, a teaspoon of baking powder, and a teaspoon of kosher salt. Whisk well to combine before separating 2 egg whites from their yolks and whisking the yolks together with 1 3/4 cups of buttermilk. We're also going to add a quarter cup of our brown butter. You could also optionally use vegetable oil. Mix until homogeneous and add to our dry ingredients and whisk vigorously until no lumps remain. Now we're going to use a hand mixer to whip our egg whites to stiff peaks. To ensure a light and fluffy batter, make sure that there are absolutely no lumps in our initial mixture thing, and add the egg whites and gently fold in until completely incorporated. Be sure not to overmix this because we don't want to lose all that air we introduced to the egg whites. Generously spray the replacement waffle iron that you had to buy with nonstick spray before adding about 3/4 cup of our waffle batter. Jam it down, crack it open, and arrange decoratively to impress any brunch guests or just yourself. Hit it with a dollop of brown butter and a generous drizzle of our caramel sauce. And to make sure that we're staying true to form, we're going to add some smoked sea salt. This is going to add some flavor and texture. Now, while I do not think that you should make Homer's Moon waffles at home, they are a mess and they're pretty disgusting, I do think that you should go and make a batch of these like right now. Like even if it's midnight on a Tuesday, because that's when I made these. Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're in for a bit of a brief episode as I fathom the fundamentals of a Flanders hot chocolate. Really just a hot chocolate that elicits the phrase, oh my god, upon sipping. That means looking at different kinds of chocolate, looking at different kinds of canned milk, fresh milk, heavy cream, even goat's milk. Ultimately, I found that my preferred blend was 2 parts whole milk to 1 part heavy cream to 1 part evaporated milk. Go for sweetened condensed milk if you want an ultra creamy hot chocolate, but I like something that's a little bit more sippable. So I am whisking and heating my mixture together over medium heat, and in the time that it takes to make and consume a Negroni cocktail, we should have some steaming hot but not boiling milk, around 190 degrees Fahrenheit, at which point we're going to add maybe a half a cup of Ghirardelli cocoa powder. This brings a lot of fruitiness and acidity to our hot cocoa. And then I'm going to add some Guittard 70% dark baking chocolate. This is going to bring some sweetness and some earthiness. And of course, we got to bring some actual sugar to the party. I'm adding a half a cup for this amount of milk and chocolate. Continue whisking and heating until everything is incorporated, and now it's time for some flavor boosters. How about some kosher salt? Salt and chocolate? That just makes sense. How about a small pinch of ground cinnamon? And if you really want to turn things up to 11, add a teaspoon of instant coffee. I promise it's not going to make it taste like coffee, even though this wouldn't be a bad thing. It's just going to make it extra chocolatey. And as usual, taste as you go. That's the only way to make sure that the food you're making is actually tasty. And now it's time for the Flanders assembly. We're starting with a small mountain of canned whipped cream, some chocolate shavings, a whole graham cracker on which we're going to add a little bit more canned whipped cream for glue, but it's not going to really work to balance a marshmallow upon, so I recommend pre-pressing a marshmallow into a graham cracker and then inserting into the frosting before toasting the marshmallow to S'moresian completion. You guys might not like burnt marshmallows, but I do, so deal with it. I'm treating the marshmallow and graham cracker as appetizers for the main event, which is a delicious cup of hot cocoa. The kind that makes you say, oh my god.
This will be our Simpsons' last lanyap.
Come on, you gonna kill him with the pastry? I've seen this man eat a bowl of change.
This eclair is over 1 million calories, 25 pounds of butter per square inch, covered with chocolate so dark, light cannot escape its surface. No, this is just a picture.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week I forgot to film my walk-on shot, so here's a little bit of table cleaning for you. Squeaky clean. So now let's take a look at that eclair from The Simpsons. First up, we gotta make some choux pastry, combining 180 grams of unsalted butter and 225 grams each water and milk in a large saucepan over medium heat. Then in a separate bowl, we're combining 225 grams of bread flour, 1 tablespoon sugar, and 12 grams of butter powder. This is an attempt to pack even more butter per square inch into our eclairs. Go ahead and bring the butter, water, and milk mixture up to a bare simmer. As soon as you start to see some little bubs around the outside of the pan, take it off the heat and add the dry ingredients, mixing together into a thick, pasty dough. Once all the flour is nice and hydrated and no dry clumps remain, we're going to place this guy back over medium heat, and we're going to cook it for anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes. And joy of joys, we need to stir it constantly. You know that it's ready to remove from the heat when a thin layer of fond starts forming on the bottom of the pot. This indicates that your starches are gelatinized or something, I don't know. Kendall told me what it means and I forgot immediately. Dump this into the bowl of your awaiting stand mixer with the paddle attachment attached. Bust up and thoroughly beat together half a dozen eggs, and then we're going to slowly pour the eggs into the mixer while it's running, maybe half a cup at a time, letting it fully incorporate into the batter before adding any more. Our objective is to turn this from a pasty batter into more of a gooey batter, which you know it's done when it makes an hourglass when stretched between 2 fingers, or it makes the Dairy Queen, no that's not quite right, let's try that again, or it makes the Dairy Queen, damn it, or when it makes the Dairy Queen curl, there it is, when a finger dipped into the dough is inverted. That means our dough is ready to pipe, so we're going to place it into a piping bag and then line a rimmed baking sheet with parchment paper using nonstick spray to secure it in place. Once you got that nice and laid out, it's time to pipe out some pastry fingers. You can expect them to just about double in size in the oven, so bear that in mind when deciding on length and girth. And then right at the end, you want to stop squeezing the bag and sort of flip the pastry back onto itself. Then once everybody's all nice and piped out, including the runty last one because I ran out of dough, you can flatten these little tails out using a wetted finger. Then these guys are headed for the oven, where I learned a lesson about temperature. I started off my first batch at 425 degrees Fahrenheit for about 20-25 minutes, which unfortunately caused them to explode. I did a little bit of research and turns out too high temperatures in the oven can cause a choux explosion. Good news is that these guys were still hollow, which means that our pastry's good. We just got to try cranking things down a little bit, so for the next batch I went with 375, plus slightly smaller fingers, just to see what would happen. These guys came out much more even, much smoother, and no blowouts. But as you may have predicted, they're way too small to kill anyone, much less Homer Simpson. So slightly bigger fingers, 375 Fahrenheit for 30 to 35 minutes, and I cranked on my oven's convection function towards the last 10 minutes of cooking for perfectly puffed choux with nice even browning. Now while these guys cool completely, we got a bunch of other stuff to make. First up, some pastry cream. We're measuring out 150 grams of eggs. Go ahead and beat those up a little bit in a heat-proof bowl and set them aside. Then in a separate bowl, we need to make a slurry out of 40 grams of cornstarch, 25 grams of sugar that we're going to whisk in there to act as a dispersant, and 50 grams of whole milk. Go ahead and tiny whisk that together to combine, and bear in mind you're going to need to whisk it again before you use it. Last thing, before we head over to the stovetop, we're going to slice and scrape 1 vanilla pod. Now in our large saucepan, we are combining 400 grams of whole milk, 50 grams of sugar, and our sliced and scraped vanilla bean. Whisk to combine, and then over medium heat, we're going to bring this guy just shy of a simmer. We just want it getting a little steamy. Then we're going to go do the custard thing with our eggs. We're going to start by whisking 50 final grams of sugar into our eggs. Sorry, Tiny Whisk, I think this is a job for your bigger brother, because in order to temper the eggs with our steamy milk mixture, we need to keep it moving constantly. Now here you can see me blissfully unaware that I'm spilling milk everywhere because it's right out of my eye line. I'm just living my life, having a grand old time. So you might want to do what I normally do when I make custard on the show, which is slowly ladle it into the eggs. But I think I got enough in there, so I'm going to dump the eggs back into the steaming milk. Once again, whisking constantly evenly and thoroughly to make sure that we don't scramble anybody. Then this guy's headed back over to the stovetop where we're going to bring him up to a bare simmer over medium heat. And of course, story of my life, while whisking constantly. Once it just starts to bubble, now's the time that we're going to add our cornstarch slurry. This stuff starts to thicken as soon as it hits the heat, so you want to pour it in slowly, and you guessed it, whisk constantly. We're going to cook this for about 1 minute, whisking constantly, until the cornstarch is fully activated and we have a nice thick custard. Kill the heat, and then all we have to do is add 45 grams of unsalted butter from its container that it really doesn't want to leave. Whisk that in until it's fully melted and incorporated, retrieve the vanilla pod, and there you have it, a classic vanilla pastry cream, which now needs to be fully chilled, and the fastest way to do that is to spread it out on a rimmed baking sheet lined with plastic wrap. This stuff starts to form a skin very quickly, so we want to immediately wrap it in said plastic wrap, making sure that there are no air bubbles, and that it's all directly in contact with the surface of the custard. Then this guy's headed into the fridge for at least an hour. Last up, the chocolate glaze, which was described as so dark that light could not escape its surface. So I got 250 grams of finely chopped, very, very dark chocolate, that is 100% chocolate, which I'm going to start to melt in a double boiler. About halfway through, I'm adding 125 grams of unsalted butter cut into cubes, and about 15 grams of extra Dutch cocoa powder, the darkest cocoa powder I could find. Also, since dark chocolate is very, very bitter, we're going to bring some sweetness by virtue of 75 grams of corn syrup. Go ahead and melt that completely in the double boiler, mixing constantly of course, until it's smooth and glassy and ready for dipping. But first we must fill our eclairs. The traditional way to do this is to cut little X's at 3 points in the bottom of each choux pastry, and use those as entry points for the nozzle of a piping bag. Pipe just about as much as you can in there because you want to fill the cavity of the eclair as best you can. And these guys are going for an upside down dip in the chocolate bath. I found it helpful to hold the eclair vertically and let chocolate drip off one side, so that way you end up with nice, clean, chocolatey edges. Once those guys are all coated in the chocolate glaze, we're going to let that set for about 15 minutes before attempting to decorate with chantilly cream. For that, we've got 1.5 cups of cold heavy cream, a teaspoon of vanilla extract, and about 3 tablespoons of powdered sugar, which we're going to beat together into what you might think is called whipped cream, but it's not. It's chantilly cream. It sounds fancier. Also, chantilly cream is by definition about twice as sweet as whipped cream, which we need with all that bitter dark chocolate. Now all we have to do is pipe some exquisite decorations onto our eclairs, which as you can see I'm struggling with, but practice makes perfect, and by the 5th or 6th one I was actually making them look pretty nice. And there you have it, a batch of extra buttery, extra dark chocolatey eclairs of varying decorative quality. So here's my favorite one, and sure, it looks pretty enough, but how's it taste? And the answer is pretty tasty, just like an eclair with maybe slightly darker chocolate. But it's definitely not 1 million calories, and it's definitely not going to kill anybody anytime soon. For that we need to step up our form factor a little bit, so let's make some big old choux pastry puffs. I'm baking these at 350 for about 40 minutes to make sure that they don't burn and so that they're cooked all the way through. There we go, that's looking a little bit more like la bombe. And Kendall had a fun idea for how to make it deadly. As you may or may not know, I may or may not be allergic to bananas. Not really sure. Last time I ate a banana, I went into anaphylactic shock, so a few healthy glugs of banana extract and maybe a slightly more sinister tool for filling it up. There we go, that looks every bit as scary as I hoped it would. So now let's use it to fill up our la bombe. This will be binging with Babish's last long. I can't do a French accent, I guess. Make sure it's filled to the brim with banana pastry cream. Give it a dip. Let it drip horizontally to keep those nice crisp chocolatey edges. Let that sit for about 15 minutes, and then the chantilly cream on The Simpsons was kind of this big gnarled stripe. So there that is, and here we go. Nice knowing you guys. I had a good run. Oh, thank you, Kendall Lisa.
I spent the next 3 years in a POW camp, forced to subsist on a thin stew made of fish, vegetables, prawns, coconut milk, and 4 kinds of rice. I came close to madness trying to find it here in the States, but they just can't get the spices right.
My punishment?
Oh.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking another look at the foods from The Simpsons. Now, if you're having guests over and you don't have time to whip up, let's say, some steamed hams, the next best thing might be Principal Skinner's POW stew, which sounds a lot like a Thai tom kha gung, which I'm sure I just pronounced correctly and inoffensively. Regardless, it's served with 4 different kinds of rice, and until recently, I, like you, cooked my rice to a gluey paste until I discovered the art of pressure cooker rice pressure cooker rice cooking. What I'm doing here is combining the prescribed amount of rice and water as outlined by the product packaging and placing in the pressure cooker for 25 minutes for harder types of rice like brown rice and red rice, and as little as 1 minute for a more quick cooking rice like jasmine or this absolutely beautiful green jade rice. And since I'm cooking them back to back, I'm placing them all in a casserole side by side covered with tin foil in a 200-degree Fahrenheit oven, keeping everything warm while we make our stew. Now this is first and foremost a seafood stew, so we're going to start with some prawns that we're going to shell and devein by making a small slit on top of the shelled prawn and pulling out the little digestive, poop tract. Rinse and repeat, but do not throw away your shells. We're making a little bit of shellfish stock to really amp up the seafood flavor. We're starting by adding some scallions to some oil that's been preheated over medium-high heat, adding our prawn shells and sauteing until they start to show some color, at which point we're going to deglaze with a few glugs of white wine and a solid cup, if not 2 cups, of water. We're then going to let that simmer for a solid 45 minutes until it's nice and seafoody, draining and setting aside while we prepare the vegetable elements of our stew. We're going to start with some minced garlic, some minced ginger, minced lemongrass, minced shallot, some trimmed green beans, and some chopped shiitake mushrooms. We're going to saute these all together until fragrant, deglaze with a little bit of our seafood stock, and add some kaffir lime leaves. These are a little bit hard to get a hold of. If you can't find them, just use some freshly squeezed lime and lime zest. We're also going to add a few tablespoons of green curry paste, sauteing and letting all those flavors get to know each other before we add some bamboo shoots, some sliced red bell pepper, and at this point, if you wanted to heat things up, you could add some Thai bird's eye chilies. But I'm not in the mood for spicy tonight, so I'm sticking with some fish sauce and another 2 or 3 cups of our shellfish stock. We're also going to add 1 can of coconut milk, and ideally at this point you want to add Thai basil, but I couldn't find any, so regular basil will do in a pinch. And now we're going to add our seafood. I went with some sliced monkfish for the fish element and our shelled deveined prawns. And now let's see if we can get the spices right. I'm going to add a little bit of ground cardamom and cayenne pepper and a little pinch of brown sugar before covering and poaching for 5 to 10 minutes until all the seafood is cooked through. And now to plate up the wholly unnecessary 4 different kinds of rice and ladling alongside it our stew. Now I gotta say, this stuff turned out really good, and it's interesting because there's so many different ways you can customize it, but not as many different ways as you can customize a crayon sandwich. You might have seen me make the grilled crayon sandwich with Rhett and Link on Good Mythical Morning, and as pretty as it was wholly inedible, so I decided to make a rainbow grilled cheese sandwich. So I'm taking 3 different kinds of cheese and coloring them with food coloring, mixing them around, and spooning them into some rainbowy rows atop some plain white sandwich bread. And then I'm going to make this as I would any other grilled cheese sandwich. Melt lots and lots of butter in a non-stick pan, butter one side of the bread, place the sandwich non-buttered side down in the skillet, toast, and flip. Slice in half on the diagonal. Remember, we want to see all these colors. And to get that stretch, you got to sort of wiggle the sandwich together and then pull apart. I know it's not made of actual crayons, but this is a Ralph Wiggum sandwich that's actually good enough to eat. I'm very sorry, but I could not come up with an appropriate substitute for thumbtacks.
My dessert dogs. It's deep-fried cookie dough with meringue buns, cherry ketchup, and caramel mustard.
It's dessert, but it's hot dogs, so it's good for you.
Marge, I don't want to freak you out, but I think I love you.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week I'm walking in from the other side of the frame because I forgot to shoot my intro shot. That, and we're taking a look at Marge Simpson's dessert dogs, the genesis of which will be some hard meringue hot dog buns. We're just gonna make a super basic meringue here, separating 3 egg whites into the bowl of a stand mixer, picking out any shells, to which we're going to add 1/8 teaspoon of cream of tartar before using a wire whisk to whip the whites into a foamy frenzy. About 1 to 2 minutes on medium-high speed. Make sure your pre-measured granulated sugar is free of lumps, and prepare your food coloring. I want a nice light brown, so I'm going with 3 drops each of yellow and red and 2 drops of blue, which, if my days of finger painting taught me anything, should yield a nice muddy brown, which is going to be lightened up significantly when we add about 1/3 cup of sugar, slowly in a nice gradual stream while the mixer runs on medium speed. Then once all the sugar is incorporated, it's time to crank this guy up to medium-high speed and beat the egg whites until they reach stiff peaks. This is a good time to make any last-minute changes to the color mixture or add any flavorings that you like, and overall beat for anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes until the egg whites are smooth and glossy and satine. And of course they hold a stiff peak. Now onto the tricky task of turning them into buns. I'm going to bend these cannoli molds open a little bit so they stand on their own, and then cover them in aluminum foil so our meringues have a surface on which to bake. And then it's just a matter of spreading the meringue onto the mold so it resembles an inverted hot dog bun. Meringue would probably not be my first choice in making a tasty fake. I might go with something like sponge cake or brioche. Especially due to meringue's surprisingly long bake time, we need to let this go at 225 degrees Fahrenheit for 2.5 hours. Make sure you do not open the oven door even after they're done. We need to let them sit in the oven until the whole oven has cooled off completely. Then once removed from the oven, they are extremely fragile, so don't be such a jock when you're taking your aluminum foil out of your meringue hot dog buns. Once you've removed the foil, set them aside until ready to use, because now we have to make our chocolate chip cookie dough hot dogs. Who writes this stuff? For this, I'm going to make a very solid, basic cookie dough. 1 stick of butter, 1/4 cup of white sugar, 3/4 cup of brown sugar, creamed together in the bowl of a stand mixer, 1 large egg, mixed until combined. Add 1 cup of all-purpose flour, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. Add about 6 ounces of roughly chopped bittersweet chocolate, mixed to combine, and there you have it, the gold standard Toll House Special, which we're now going to mold into little saccharine Hebrew nationals. Once shaped into these kind of unfortunate-looking shapes, we're going to cover these with plastic wrap and toss them in the freezer for about an hour to completely solidify, during which time we're going to make our Candyland condiments. First up, cherry ketchup. I'm starting by pitting my cherries using a single chopstick to push the pit directly out the bottom of the cherry, and then I'm placing the pitted cherries into a blender. Alternately, you could use a juicer, but the end game here is to turn these cherries into juice. Make sure you clean up all that cherry juice, otherwise it's going to stain everything you own. Then I'm going to use this blender's extract function to extract the juice from these cherries. Once it looks like a scene from your favorite horror movie, it's time to strain it into a small saucepan. Use as fine a mesh strainer or cheesecloth as you've got. Make sure you add all your harvested pits, there's a lot of good juice in there to squeeze out, and then press it through the sieve until you've got nothing left but a bunch of cherry pulp. Now it's time to cook this juice down a little bit with a couple optional tablespoons of sugar. Depends on how tart your sourced cherries were. Then once we've let everything cook together and dissolve for a few minutes, we're going to thicken the mixture with cornstarch by making a slurry out of about a tablespoon of cornstarch and a few tablespoons of cherry juice. Tiny whisked until smooth, and then tiny whisked together, simmering for 2 to 3 minutes or until it's nice and thick. Then for our caramel mustard, we are combining 1/3 cup of water and 1 cup of sugar in a medium saucepan, and then bringing to a simmer without stirring. I said without stirring. All the sugar should dissolve and it should turn a lovely color of amber after about 10 minutes. At this point, we're going to kill the heat and constantly whisk while adding 3/4 cup of heavy cream. It's going to spit and sputter and steam, but just be assertive and keep whisking until it's nice and smooth. Once it's cooled off for 1 to 2 minutes, add 2 tablespoons of butter and whisk to combine. Now you could be facing thousands of dollars in civil penalties and even jail time from the FDA if you do not salt your caramel. So make sure you season liberally with the kosher stuff lest you wish to be brought up on assault charges. I can actually feel all of your eyes collectively rolling into the back of your heads, and it pleases me. Last up, a light batter for our cookie dough. We've got 1 cup of all-purpose, half a teaspoon each of baking soda and kosher salt, and about a 1/4 cup of sugar, tiny whisk to combine, before adding 1 1/4 cups of milk. Go ahead and stir this until not too many lumps remain. We want it to be like a really thin pancake batter, so adjust with more milk or flour as necessary. Then it's time to retrieve our cookie dough logs from the freezer and give them a batter bath. You might be asking yourself, why are we battering this cookie dough before frying? And that is to protect the chocolate from the heat of the oil, which would just melt it out and destroy it otherwise. Speaking of which, we've got 1 quart of vegetable oil heated to 375 degrees Fahrenheit, into which we're going to gingerly and kind of cowardly drop our logs. You could probably avoid the splatter by using a mesh spider, but I was feeling lazy. Anyway, after 2 to 4 minutes, these should emerge golden brown, crisp, and looking just like almost everything served at the Texas State Fair, but with a striking resemblance to human shit. Once broken in half, however, you'll find that this turd only contains melty chocolate and cookie dough. How's that for a tasty fake? So now that we have all of our elements ready to go, it's time to assemble. First, we're going to place our quote-unquote hot dog delicately into our quote-unquote bun, and drizzle decoratively with both our quote-unquote ketchup and our quote-unquote mustard. And there you have it, folks, Marge Simpson's oven-fresh bake-off winning dessert dogs. I'll be the first to admit that they just barely look like a hot dog, but much more importantly, how do they taste? And the answer is really mostly just like cookie dough. The meringue is more sweet than flavorful. It really serves to bring texture to the party more than anything. And the cherry ketchup and caramel mustard kind of get lost in the insanity of what you're eating. And as you can see, they're very messy to eat. But all that said, they weren't bad at all. Cookie dough was delicious, the meringue was crunchy, and I almost managed to eat a whole dog before I realized what I was doing and stopped.
Oh, Oh, so hard to resist. Mesquite grilled onions, jalapeno relish. Wait a minute. Those are Southwestern ingredients! Mango lime salsa? That's the kind of bold flavor they enjoy in Albuquerque!
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week I'm betting you're guessing that I got these hot dogs on ButcherBox. Nope, but I did make them from ButcherBox meat. I got 4 lovely ribeyes here that I'm going to cut into 1-inch cubes, and 4 strips of bacon. That's right, we're making beef and bacon dogs, both of which we're going to subject to the freezer along with our meat grinder for about 15-20 minutes before commencing to grinding on the largest plate. Keeping everything cold prevents smearing and other general forms of grossness. Once all the meat has been ground, we're going to toss it together with our spice and cure mixture. Into a separate bowl, I'm combining 18 grams of kosher salt, 6 grams garlic powder, 4 grams onion powder, 4 grams white pepper, 10 grams paprika, and 1.5 grams of pink curing salt, or Prague powder number 1. Go ahead and tiny whisk that together until all the spices are evenly distributed. Add it to the meat and toss to combine. Bear in mind this spice mixture is for 1 kilogram of beef and 100 grams of bacon. Once all the meaty pebbles have been evenly coated in the spice mixture, it's time to bust out our very finest grinding plate from the freezer and grind it once again into a smooth, beefy spaghetti. Then we're going to take our smooth, beefy spaghetti and process it even further into something called a farce. But unlike the work of Monty Python or the Valentine's Day episode of Frasier, this farce is simply our meat mash emulsified together via food processor with some ice water, 250 milliliters all told for our 1.1 kilograms of meat. I'm doing this in 2 batches so I don't burn out my food processor like I did during the Irishman episode, scooping out the first batch into a bowl and then drizzling the remaining 125 ml into the food processor while it's running with the second batch of beef. Once we have our nice, smooth, creamy farce, you can either dig in with a spoon. I'm just kidding, don't do that. What we're actually going to do is allow this to cure. Covering it with plastic wrap pressed right down onto the surface of the meat so as to prevent oxidation, and letting it chill out in the fridge overnight. And then it's my least favorite time of day, sausage stuffing time. I have here a length of natural sheep casing that is going to give our hot dogs a snappy bite. After letting it soak for 15-20 minutes, I am threading it onto our sausage stuffer, snipping off the excess, tying a knot so as to secure the extruding farce, and poking a hole in there using a sharp thing. This is going to help air escape and help prevent a phallic blowout as we begin the very unpleasant process of shoving our squishy farce through the machine. And try as I might, we still ended up with an intestinal condom, so I'm going to do the opposite of what you should do to a condom and poke more holes in it, give it another try, and success. Stuffing sausage by yourself is an annoying process because you have to both load the farce into the grinder and guide the casing off of the machine, so hopefully next time ordinary sausage will come through and give me some help. Once all your sausage has been stuffed, go ahead and tie off the other end, give it a little wipe down so the exterior is a little less gross, and then it's time to start twisting into individual links, which you want to do alternating directions each link. This prevents the sausages from unraveling when it comes time to cook them, which it is now. First we need to poke them with a whole bunch of holes using our sharp thing to prevent blowouts. Then these guys are headed out onto the smoker, which I have set to 175 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm using mesquite wood pellets for the sake of our onions later on, and so we can get that nice Albuquerque flavor in our hot dogs. Arrange them into a perfect circle if you feel like it, shut it down, and let them smoke for 1 hour, or until they register 150 degrees Fahrenheit at their thickest point. Not to mention look, feel, and smell like hot dogs, but do they taste like hot dogs? Let's find out. First we're going to snip the bits of casing betwixt the dogs so as to separate them, slice them open, and give them a try, and I'm happy to report that they taste like bacon hot dogs, so big win in my book. Now on to the plethora of condiments that adorn this dog. First up, jalapeno relish. I got about 8 de-seeded, deveined, and de-stemmed jalapenos, and 2 large cloves of garlic, the latter of which I'm going to process a bit before adding the jalapenos to ensure its even distribution. Once that's good and chopped up, add the peños, and then process until it has a relish-like consistency, so nice little chunks. Scrape down the sides of the bowl occasionally, and process until your desired consistency is achieved. Then to sort of quick pickle these guys, I've got equal parts vinegar and water, about a half cup each, a tablespoon of kosher salt, and a 1/4 cup of sugar, all of which I'm going to tiny whisk together and bring to a boil before pouring over our jalapeno garlic mixture, which I'm going to let cool completely about 1 hour before draining off excess liquid and refrigerating. This stuff turned out delicious and I highly recommend you make it. Next up on the hit list, a mango salsa, for which it comes as no surprise we're going to need some mangoes, which if you saw me answering questions from Twitter on Wired, you know I still don't know how to do with any efficiency or accuracy. So I'm going to keep slicing it up like an avocado avocado and sort of inverting it so it looks like the picture on a package of High Chew, scraping off all the fruit, and then chopping it up into a salsa-like consistency. Said salsa seen on The Simpsons didn't seem to have any other mix-ins, but it's not really salsa without some red onion. So I got half a small red onion here that I'm going to finely chop and add to the party, along with one small lime cut in half and juiced by hand. And because I care more about accuracy to southwestern flavors than my own taste buds, a little bit of chopped cilantro, a generous sprinkle of kosher salt, and a few twists of freshly ground black pepper. Go ahead and mix that together and you got yourself one mango salsa. Cover this up and refrigerate until ready to use. Last up, we have our mesquite grilled onions. This is probably most easily achieved by throwing some mesquite chips on a charcoal grill, but I don't have that, so onto the smoker it goes, this time cranked up to 500 degrees Fahrenheit for searing. Once we've logged a few minutes on there and we got some nice char marks, it's time to chop these guys up and assemble. First, I'm going to lay out all three of our condiments here, our jalapeno relish, our mango salsa, and our mesquite grilled onions that I'm going to cut into hot dog appropriate sized pieces. If you want to see how to make your own hot dog buns, click the link in the upper right hand corner right now. Stuff a freshly charred hot dog into the bun and arrange the condiments in the strange orientation that we find them in on The Simpsons, that is, next to each other rather than concurrently. Kind of an interesting idea actually, so you get different flavors as you eat the hot dog. But how does it work in practice? Only one way to find out. And between the delicious homemade hot dog and the creative, flavorful toppings, this is genuinely one of the best hot dogs I've ever had in my life. If it were on a plate, it would legally be in the Clean Plate Club. But that being said, I think all these condiments would work better together rather than separately. Kind of like an old friend of mine, America. So I'm going to slop it up with all them toppings, and because I'm clearly biased, here comes Sawyer, a third-party adjudicator, and who, as an attorney, is incapable of lying. Let's see what he thinks of the new and improved Isotope dog. And you know it's good because you can't fake eyebrow movement like that.
Marge, Simpsons wasabi buffalo wings?
Ooh, an Eastern twist on a Western New York favorite.
These wings are going straight to my thighs, and I say bon voyage.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week I got a whole lot of chicken, specifically whole chicken wings, and we're well past overdue for a refresher on how to break those down. For those of you who remember 2017's lemon pepper wet video, this is an whole chicken wing. To break this down into its more familiar parts, we're going to locate the joint between the drum and the wing, cutting down through the skin to the joint, breaking the joint open, and cutting between the bones, repeating with the wing tip until you have 3 distinct chicken pieces. Easy as that. Now all you gotta do is repeat it 24 times. Now with this much chicken, I'm not just going to fry it up and paint it green. I'm going to try out a bunch of things with it. So I got the wings and drumettes here, and the wing tips can be prepared, but I like them better for making stock. Now onto my scientific process, which is less scientific and more of a process. I'm starting by simply patting dry and lightly salting some wings to be stored on a wire rack set in a rim baking sheet uncovered in the fridge. This should desiccate the skin and help make it more crisp. Next up, since this is an Eastern twist on a Western New York favorite, I'm making a basic karaage or cornstarch dredge. A cup of cornstarch, 2 tablespoons of flour, teaspoon of baking powder, tablespoon of kosher salt, and a tiny whisk. Coming to the rescue to make all of our different powders evenly distributed and homogeneous. Now to coat the chicken, you want to drop it in the dredge and sort of press and massage, making sure that every nook and or cranny is thoroughly coated. Next up, I wanted to try potato starch, but the deliveryman brought me potato flakes, and I was like, hey, that could work. Same formula as before, but with instant mashed potatoes instead of cornstarch. Now since these guys are big and flaky, I'm going to make sure to really press it onto the surface of the chicken. I have no earthly idea what this is going to do, but fried potato flakes kind of sounds right to me. So we'll do this and we'll fry it and we'll eat it. Probably be good. Next and last, since we're well and truly in it, let's try it mode, what about a little bit of both? Combining the cornstarch and the potato flake mixture. I totally only did this to use up the extra space on the tray. I doubt that it will have any bearing on my findings or that I will have any findings at all, but it does produce a pretty platter of poultry. So over here we got plain skin, next to that the lightly seasoned cornstarch dredge, then the potato flake dredge, and then whatever this is on the end. I don't know about you guys, but I'm excited, especially because this is an experiment within an experiment, because I'm going to desiccate these guys in the fridge overnight, and I'm going to try making them day of to see if there's any difference. Next up, obviously we got to talk sauce. What really buffaloes hot sauce is the butter, usually in a ratio of 2 to 1 Frank's Red Hot to butter. Things like garlic or Worcestershire sauce might be added, but the basic framework for us to work within is thus. The first and easiest move is to buy some green hot sauce and buffaloify it. But the sauce isn't just green, it's wasabi sauce. So we need to add some wasabi paste that's coming out of this tube weird for some reason. I'm going to start with about a tablespoon and adjust the taste once I've added the butter. So let's see how this turns out. I cannot imagine this is going to be anything good. It's not bad at all. It's actually it's very good. Like to the point where I'm ready to stop here. It is wasabi buffalo sauce incarnate. So moving on, let's obviously make our own green hot sauce from scratch. As you can see, I have assembled here before you every kind of green pepper except oh my god, did I forget the most perfect pepper for this situation? One of my favorites that's green, spicy, flavorful, and Japanese? That's right, shishitos. Ultimately, I want a sauce with a nice balance of flavor and heat, and since only about 1 in 10 shishitos are spicy, I'm adding about 5 or 6 jalapenos for heat, plus 1 poblano pepper and 2 Italian frying peppers. Before these guys head into the broiler, we're going to take off their stems, realize that our fridge door has been open this entire time, go back and fake the final stem being ripped off, and the audience will never be the wiser. These guys are headed under a broiler set to maximum power. About 5 minutes or until deeply charred but not blackened on one side. Flip everybody over, put them back underneath the broiler, and repeat. Now you want to take off any skin that is like fully carbonized, like shiny black, to prevent any acrid or bitter flavors, but most of these guys are good to go straight into the blender, where we're going to make a pepper mash, and like it or not, with this particular lens, you're going to see some face. I'm also going to add 3 or 4 garlic cloves, and I'm starting with half a cup of distilled water. Why distilled? Because once we've ground this up in our blender or food processor into what I think is rather an attractive paste, we're going to ferment it, or more accurately, I'm not going to ferment it, but you might want to. Simply fill a sanitized jar about 3/4 of the way with pepper paste, cover with a cheesecloth or a sheet of paper towel, and then somehow, even though you don't have any rubber bands or string, you need to affix it to the jar. In a pinch, a USB-A to USB micro cable will work. Then let ferment at room temperature for anywhere from 7 to 21 days. I'll let you guys know how this stuff works out in a few weeks on Instagram. For now, we're pretending that our still delicious pepper paste is fully fermented, adding a half cup of sushi rice vinegar and a tablespoon each, soy sauce and fish sauce. This is to about 2 cups worth of pepper paste, which we're now going to blend into as smooth as possible a liquid, adjusting with more vinegar as necessary until it is pourable. We're straining out any solids through a fine mesh sieve, adding a generous squeeze of wasabi paste, 2 to 3 tablespoons depending on how much you want your nose to hurt, tasting for seasoning, and this stuff rocks. Shishito wasabi hot sauce is, I wish I could airmail you each a bottle of this stuff, but this is the only bowl of it in existence. A little more vinegar for a Frank's-like consistency, and we're ready to start frying. I got our overnight wings, our day of wings, and 2 quarts of peanut oil heated between 350 to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Add the wings and fry for 5 to 8 minutes until golden brown and crisp. Now, something that I found out right away is that the potato-coated chicken browned more quickly and more deeply than its non-potato counterparts. As you can see, both the potato flake batch and the half and half batch browned more significantly and developed a cragglier surface. Cornstarch versions are a little paler but still nice and crisp, and the only wings that seemed to benefit from an overnight rest in the fridge were the naked ones. Not only are the potato-coated wings really crisp, their faster cooking time means no overcooked chicken. But how do they sauce? Potato coating is great on its own, but not so great with the sauce. It gets a little soft. But on its own, it adds almost like a French fry flavor to the chicken, so there's a strong case to hang on to that for the next time you're making fried chicken. But now it's time to see how our green pepper sauce buffalo-fies. I'm tossing it with the good old-fashioned skin wing, which really held up the best of the sauce. Is it neon Nickelodeon gack green? No. Is it a really genuinely good wasabi buffalo wing? Yes. It entered the coveted cleaned and separated bone club. But hey, why not? That was cool. Why not add that brighter green wasabi stuff that we made earlier? It didn't add much to the flavor, but it didn't hurt it that badly either. But even with that addition, just a warning, probably gonna have to Photoshop the thumbnail on this video. Because once we've sauced and tossed all of our wings and arranged them into not quite the same pattern as Marge had them, but close as I can get, you will see that they're a bit of a brownish kind of green. A little less accurate, maybe a little more appetizing looking, and 100% delicious. Just gonna walk very slowly and make sure that nobody notices the huge bald spot in the back of the plate.
Why are these noodles orange?
I made it with Cheetos, just like you like it. If the sauce is too thick, I can add more root beer.
Maybe I'm just not hungry.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at the Cheeto root beer and hot dog noodles from The Simpsons, for which, as you can see, I have the titular ingredients laid out here before me. The method for this dish is unknown, so I'm just gonna have to improv a little bit, bringing, and I never thought I'd say this, 4 cups of root beer to a boil. It's gonna be hard to tell when this is boiling because of the bubbles. I think that's boiling, so now I'm going to add a pound of spaghetti, keeping it moving immediately upon insertion so it doesn't stick together. It appears to be extra sticky, probably because of the sugar in the root beer. And then for flavor, color, and thickening the sauce, we're going to add a whole bunch of Cheetos. Whether they're crunchy or puffed, I think hardly matters. I'm just going to keep cooking this under cover so it doesn't get too thick until the pasta is cooked through. And whoop, almost forgot the hot dogs. I'm just going to chop these guys up and add them right at the end so as to heat through. And I gotta hand it to Marge, this is a pretty easy one-pot meal. But how's it taste? Well, luckily it's my job to taste this stuff so you don't have to. And I gotta say, really, truly awful. A halting combination of cheesy, corny, hot doggy, and alarmingly sweet. I can see why very young children or cartoon characters might like this, but I think we can do a whole lot better. About the only savory application I can imagine for root beer is in a braise. So we're going to start by sauteing some mirepoix in a little bit of neutral flavored oil like vegetable or canola until it's deeply caramelized, adding 1 clove of crushed garlic and a couple tablespoons of tomato paste and sauteing together until the garlic is fragrant and the tomato paste is sticking to the bottom of the pan. Then we are deglazing with 2 cups of root beer. Make sure to scrape up all that good stuff off the bottom of the pot. Then I'm going to add a couple sprigs of fresh thyme and parsley, and in place of our hot dogs, some nice bone-in beef short ribs, which I'm placing in the pot bone side up. Then I'm going to add enough homemade chicken stock so that the short ribs are only peeking up about an inch above the liquid. Then this entire affair is headed into a 325-degree Fahrenheit oven for anywhere from 3 to 4 hours. Halfway through cooking, we're flipping the beef short ribs over so that they get even caramelization, topping up with another cup or 2 of chicken stock if necessary, and cooking until they're fall off the bone tender and they have a deep brown crust. I know these guys look a little dark, I think that's because of all the sugar in the root beer, but trust me when I say that they're very tender, very juicy, and surprisingly delicious. Root beer has all different kinds of spices and, as you can imagine, various roots in it, and when braised it actually makes for a pretty lovely savory flavor, so we're going to save all this sauce, placing it in the fridge for a few hours so we can defat it, during which time we can make our Cheeto pasta. Into the bowl of a food processor, I'm combining 5½ ounces of all-purpose flour, 1½ ounces of masa, and a ½ ounce of cheddar cheese powder. This should give us a corny, cheddary flavor not unlike Cheetos. Then I'm measuring out 5 ounces of eggs, lightly beating them together and pouring them into the food processor. Mash and go and processing for anywhere from 1 to 2 minutes until the ingredients come together to form an alien orange dough that springs back with vigor when poked, indicating that we have good gluten development. If it doesn't spring back, go ahead and process it for another 15 to 30 seconds. Then we're kneading it together by hand for a little bit just to make sure that everything's evenly incorporated, wrapping in plastic wrap and letting rest at room temperature for 30 minutes, before rolling out ever thinner by virtue of a pasta roller, laminating as necessary if the dough is tearing or doesn't feel very strong, and cutting into Cheeto fettuccine. Cheeto-chini. Rinse and repeat with the remaining dough, twisting the pasta into little nests on a well-floured rimmed baking sheet, covering and fridging until ready to use. Now it's time to defat our cooking liquid. As you can see, I spread it out onto a quarter sheet because I thought that would make the fat easier to peel off, but it turns out I'm just going to strain it. Then I'm going to taste it for seasoning, and it turns out it's shockingly salty. I don't know where all the salt came from, maybe my chicken stock, but mostly we're just tasting it because it tastes good and interesting and weird. Next up, I'm removing and shredding the beef from the bone, discarding any gristle or sinew and tearing into bite-sized pieces that can be snacked on by the chef, but are also going to be perfect for our pasta, which I'm going to form a sauce with about a cup of the braising liquid, placing that into a high-walled sauté pan along with the beef and simmering. Once that starts to thicken, I'm going to cook our Cheeto pasta in some boiling water for anywhere from 30 to 90 seconds until nice and al dente, lowering the heat under the beef, and then once the pasta is nearly ready, I'm going to dump it straight into the sauce and finish cooking it in there. Go ahead and toss everybody together, and once the sauce has reached an agreeable consistency, I'm going to make this dish a little less healthy than it already is, kill the heat, and mount with butter. This is not only going to lighten up the color of the sauce, it's going to make it extra creamy and flavorful. Go ahead and taste for seasoning. Mine does not need any, so it's time to plate up. I'm going to use the old carving fork and a soup ladle trick to get my pasta in a nice nest, and of course I'm going to supplement with lots and lots of braised short rib. And just in case this dish has strayed too far from its roots, let's bring back some of the old flavor. Microplaning a crunchy Cheeto over top like Parmesan or black truffle. And there you have it, folks, an actually halfway edible bowl of Cheeto root beer and quote-unquote hot dog noodles, which has a very unique, savory, corny, cheesy flavor, which I wouldn't describe as delicious so much as addicting, because before I even knew what was happening, this guy ended up in the Clean Plate Club.
Hey, could you go across the street and get me a slice of pizza?
No pizza, only a kalash.
Oh, shoo. All right. Give me one bowl.
No bowl, stick.
Oh, jeez, that's just awful.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at a real white whale of mine, Clav kalash and crab juice from an iconic scene in The Simpsons. As you can see, I've scored a can of the crab juice right here, so let's give this stuff a try. And I gotta say, it's not bad, especially when the only other option is Mountain Dew. But if I'm being honest, probably the only reason I like this is because it's just a can of Polar toasted coconut seltzer with a sticker on it. But as a YouTuber, I think I've done my job here. I converted the logo to a smart object, I ordered special stickers, and okay fine, I will try real crab juice. juice, about the only source of which I could find is in a can of crab meat, along with what I think is an upsettingly long piece of paper. Don't worry, the crab is going to go to good use in next week's episode, but for now its precious juices are going in my mouth. Alright, here we go. Come on, Andy, this is why they pay the big bucks. And as you can imagine, it's not great. I've never just taken a shot of clam juice before, but I imagine it's like that, but with crab. But in terms of beverages, that got me thinking. One of my favorite cocktails, the michelada, famously utilizes clam juice in the form of clamato. So I'm going to make some crab motto, combining 1 ounce of crab juice with 4 ounces of tomato juice. Tiny whisk to combine, give it a little sniff to make everybody uncomfortable, and we're going to use it to build our cocktail over ice. Adding 4 ounces of the crab motto juice along with a few dashes of Worcestershire sauce, a few dashes of hot sauce, preferably a Mexican one, not Frank's, a tiny dash of soy sauce, the juice of half of 1 lime, and then the whole thing gets topped off with a frosty light beer. How much or how little depends on your taste and the size of your container. Give it a little mix and let's see how it tastes. And now this is actually not bad. It pretty much tastes the exact same as a michelada, sort of like a Bloody Mary you could bring to the beach. So that's our palatable crab juice. What about the Clav kalash? The vendor and written language appear to be vaguely Middle Eastern, so I think the best bet here is kofta. I'm starting by soaking my wood skewers for at least 30 minutes, then finally mincing 4 cloves of garlic and 2 small shallots, and I'm placing those in a cold pan, which I'm going to place over medium-low heat, adding about 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and once it starts to bubble, cooking gently for 2 to 3 minutes. Much like with pasta aglio olio, this is going to ensure that the garlic and shallots do not burn, but rather only turn a very light golden brown. I'm going to strain it through a fine mesh sieve, hang on to that garlic and shallot oil for my next salad, and allow to cool completely before building the kofta, which I'm going to make from 1 pound of ground lamb, our cooled shallot and garlic, 2 teaspoons of ground coriander, and 1.5 teaspoons of ground cumin, preferably toasted and freshly ground, 1/4 teaspoon cayenne pepper, 1 large egg white, this is going to give the kofta some structure, and some fresh herbs, 1 tablespoon finely minced fresh mint, and 3 tablespoons fresh parsley. I'm also going to season with about a teaspoon each kosher salt and freshly ground black pepper. Now it's time to make paste. And I mean that quite literally. You really want to massage the hell out of this stuff. Sort of the opposite of what you would do with a burger, this is going to make the meat cook up firm and tight, which is going to help it stick to the stick, upon which we are now going to impale it, shaping into a roughly 3-ounce long narrow meatball, shoving a stick in one of the business ends, and by the tip of the tail, smearing said meat onto the stick. This too is going to help prevent the meat from falling off the stick. These are more of the traditional kofta shape, which I want to make both for demonstration and because they're going to be my dinner this week. But I'm also going to make some big old lopsided ones to better resemble Clav kalash. Once shaped, these guys should hang out in the fridge for half an hour before grilling. But one of the primary characteristics of Clav kalash is that it looks gross, and kofta looks famously beautiful. I mean, it's a grilled meatball. So how do we match that aesthetic? To me, the Clav kalash looked almost hairy, so I wanted to figure out how I could make hair in meat form. The answer? Pork floss, a kind of Chinese pork that's been shredded so finely and dried so thoroughly that it almost resembles cotton, or sort of like a meaty dryer lint. It tastes relatively nondescript, so I thought it'd be a good way to give our Clav kalash that nasty aesthetic. But of course, I wanted to try making it myself. I've got 1.5 pounds of pork tenderloin that I'm cutting into 1-inch chunks, dropping into some boiling water and gently cooking for about 5 minutes. This is going to cause some impurities and scum to rise to the surface that we're going to skim off using our handy dandy scum skimmer. Discard that nasty looking stuff, and then we're going to drain the pork, thoroughly wash out the pot, refill it with water, and thoroughly rinse the pork. These excess proteins could cause issues down the line, and removing them ensures that we're going to have pork that we could floss with. Not literally, but you know what I mean. Add the rinsed pork back to 6 cups of clean boiling water. Walk away, then realize that there are 2 pieces still in the colander. Dump those out. And now we're going to gently simmer the pork with some aromatics. 4 slices of fresh ginger, 1 cinnamon stick and 1 star anise pod, the greens of 2 roughly chopped green onions, and 1 tablespoon each dark soy sauce and for some reason light soy sauce. Cover this guy up and maintain a bare simmer for 45 to 60 minutes until the pork is relatively tender considering how lean it is, and the thickest part of the thickest pieces register 205 degrees Fahrenheit. As you can see, the pork is dry, but it falls apart easily. So now we're going to pick out the pork pieces and put them on a plate, discard the other stuff, and then we're going to let these dried out little nuggets cool completely before engaging in rather an interesting procedure. About a dozen nuggets at a time, we're going to smash this pork using a rolling pin. I know, right? Seems odd, but it actually ends up being very necessary. After rolling and re-rolling 5 or 6 times, the meat fibers get stretched and spread to their very limits, allowing us to create finer finer, longer shreds of pork, which we're going to achieve by grabbing a handful at a time and rubbing it between the palms of our hands, repeating until the little wisps of pork are as fine as possible. After doing this with a full 1.5 pounds of pork, which yielded a better forearm workout than any I've ever done on purpose, I found that incorporating a thumb into the rubbing motion really got things across the finish line faster. And why are you laughing? Once all our pork is shredded as finely as can be, we're going to drop it into a wok along with a tablespoon of coconut oil, where we're going to gently toast it over medium-low heat. This stuff is pretty pale and mildly flavored, so we're going to combine a 1/4 teaspoon of Chinese 5-spice powder with 1 to 2 teaspoons dark soy sauce, drizzle that over top, and gently cook, drying out the pork over medium-low heat for 10 to 15 minutes. Now, this is the exact moment when I realized that I was combining pork with Turkish cuisine, which felt a bit insensitive considering its very large Muslim population. So I wanted to see, could I make meat floss from meat other than pork? I have here 1.5 pounds of similarly lean eye-round beef, which I'm going to give the same treatment: boiling, skimming, scumming, this time in addition to the soy sauce, flavoring with cinnamon, thyme, cumin, bay leaf, rosemary, and cloves to bring a slightly more Turkish vibe. Same roll, smash, and shred technique, some now extremely tired forearms, and back to the wok for the same low temperature drying method, still adding soy sauce for a bit of color. 10 to 15 minutes later, and there you have it, beef floss. I'm going to spread this stuff out evenly on a large rimmed baking sheet while it's still hot so that any remaining moisture evaporates. Alright, there's our hair made from meat. While that cools and dries, it's time to make some kofta. Outside, I've got all 4 burners on my grill heating to max for 10 to 15 minutes or until terrifyingly hot. Then I'm going to turn the burners all the way down and season the grates using vegetable oil. Shut down the lid, crank the burners back up, and let things cure for about 10 minutes. Then I'm turning the burners down on one side of the grill, placing the kofta on the hot side of the grill and searing for 2 to 3 minutes per side. Turns out even if you soak your sticks, they can still definitely catch on fire, so try to place the meat directly over the flame and let the stick hang over the cooler side of the grill. I'm giving these guys a flip and repositioning them so they don't continue to be on fire. I'm going to give those another 2 to 3 minutes until I get some good grill marks, and then we're scooting things over to the cooler side of the grill, where these guys are going to come up to temp over indirect heat. Not only is this going to prevent further flare-ups, it's going to more gently cook the meat, taking anywhere from 7 to 12 minutes to reach an internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit. Remove from the grill and let rest for 5 to 10 minutes before digging in. And what we have here are some very delicious meatballs on a stick. And if I know anything about meat and sticks, it's the bigger the better. So I'm going to do the same procedure here, searing the big boys and moving them off the heat to finish cooking, this time for more like 15 to 20 minutes. That's our completed kofta, so now it's time to complete the look. Rolling it around in our beef floss, covering it in what appears to be hair. And as far as real-life iterations of cartoon foods go, I think that we got pretty close. It's got the same almost unidentifiable form factor, the little sort of dollop on the top. The only deeply inaccurate aspect of it is that it actually tastes really, really good. The beef floss isn't bringing much to the table texture-wise, but it's definitely bringing an extra hit of meaty, spicy flavor. And while it could definitely use some bracing acidic sauce, it and about 2 other of the small ones became my dinner for the evening, and became a member of the Clean Stick Club, a club of which I believe your mom is a founding member. Sorry. Anyway, as always, recreating food from The Simpsons is a lot of fun. But the BCU is headed to Japan in a couple weeks, and we are all ears for your suggestions, ideas, and requests.